Welcome to Recess Duty, a podcast for educators to come together to share struggles, but also celebrate successes by sharing stories and ideas in a safe and supportive environment to collaborate with one another. Here's your host, Levi Allison.
Hi, everyone. This is Recess Duty with your host, Levi Allison, and today we're talking with Brian Lalor, who comes with experience in primary years leadership as a principal and Xi'an International. We'll discuss their journey and experiences in education. Thank you for joining us, Brian. How are you doing?
Wonderful, Levi. Thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely. I couldn't think of a better bud to have on as one of the first guests on the podcast. We've worked together on PYP chat for a few years, and it has been a great pleasure to get to work with you. So, Brian, for our listeners out there, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get to where you are, and what is your story?
Okay, yeah. So, again, Lee, it's been great working with you the last couple of years on PYP chat. And I am originally from the south of Ireland, from Tipperary. I grew up there, spent most of my life there before I went to university in Limerick and did a degree in manufacturing. And after I finished my degree, I always wanted to travel. And I had a friend in Jakarta, Indonesia. So I went over there and ended up teaching English over there. So that was my first experience with teaching. And my mother, however, though, had been a teacher for 42 years. So, some say it's in the blood. And then from Jakarta, I moved to Hanoi and taught there for 9 years. In my first couple of years there, I went and did a graduate diploma through the University of Southern Queensland to become a primary school teacher and began working in international schools. And then in 2014, I moved with my family. I got married while I was in Vietnam, and my wife is from Washington State. We have 3 children. 2 born in Vietnam and 1 that we recently adopted here in China. And that's it really. Since 2014, working at Xi'an Liangjiatan International School. That's me in a nutshell, Levi.
Very cool, Brian. So it sounds like you have a lot of experience and a lot of a variety of, you've been a lot of places and you've been excited about teaching and stuff. What are you working on now that you're excited about? What are you excited about at the moment?
Actually, at the moment, Levi, I am quite excited about the fact that I'll be moving into a new role in 2022. Mm-hmm. So I'll be moving from the elementary principal to the deputy head of school. So as you can imagine, there's a whole range of new things I need to learn. So at the moment, I'm actually learning a lot about facilities and maintenance and leaky roofs and finance. And of course, I have a huge learning curve with the MYP and the DP. So right now, I'm extremely excited about that. And the other thing that I'm very, very excited about is volunteering with ACS WASC, and I have a visit coming up with them. And I just find these experiences invaluable in our professional development.
Absolutely. And I sat here nodding my head, knowing that when I did my first WASC, the first person I messaged was you, because I was so nervous. I was like,
"That's right, I remember
that. What do I need to do? I'm so freaking out. This document is massive." And you were
how did that?
Oh, it went really well.
A good experience it was.
Yeah, it was a really great experience. Like you said, it's invaluable professional development. It was a lot of fun. Congratulations on the new posting. That's incredible. No one deserves it more. Give us a little bit of what are you learning? Like, you've been the principal, now you're the deputy. What are you learning? What are some challenges? How are you addressing these? Like, where do you go to learn about facilities?
Well, actually, where I've gone to learn about facilities actually is I have moved to live at the school, and living at the school now has basically the school is my home at the moment. So if there's a leaky roof in the school, there's a leaky roof in my home. We have a boarding program here. So I guess that's the short form of the answer for learning about the facilities. But it might be a good segue to Levi for me to just go into some of the things I've learned this past year, and to maybe talk
Absolutely.
a little bit about the leadership journey I've been on. Would that be okay?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're all about journeys and stories here on Recess Duty.
Well, I guess the I have learned a lot over the last years about being in leadership, and I'm referring now to a series of blog posts that I wrote on my blog, which are called Principles. There's 4 of them there, and as I was preparing for this, Levi, I can see such a progression and in my needs and in my learning over the past 6 years or so in this position. And one of the huge things that stood out to me was funny story was when I decided to become a principal, and I was asking for advice from my mom, as you do. Like I said, my mom was in education for a long time, and she was constantly being pushed by people being encouraged by people to go into leadership, but she always refused it because she realized the huge amount of stress that's on leaders from various community members. But she said to me, if you survive the first year, you'll be all right. And I remember at the time, she's pretty tough when she says things, but it was so true. And that first year, if you can just get through that first year and not make a mess of things, or if you can just not try to make too many changes, etc. In that first year, I think you'll be you'll get the experience under your belt. But then currently, then to where I am currently now, I'm really seeing extreme value in distributed leadership, or goes by parallel leadership in Australia, or teacher leadership, in other literature. But really letting go and trusting your people, allowing your good teachers to get off class, to lead focus groups, to lead parent workshops. And as you distribute that work, you're developing a whole other level of leaders under you, that I firmly believe that if I was to leave this school tomorrow, there's at least 3-4 people who could carry on the work seamlessly in my absence.
That is amazing to listen and hear, because I know, having talked to some of the faculty members at your school, it is on Twitter that it is very genuine and very true of the distributed leadership model that you show. And again, like, we can't be everywhere. Even as teachers, we can't be everywhere. We can't do all things. So we must divide and conquer. Even, the best thing about agency in the classroom is you're giving the learning back to the students or to the adult learner, and giving them a pathway to make sense of their own learning, and to really take their learning into a place of your own. So you mentioned a little bit about your principles blog post. Can you tell us a little bit more about one of them, or a couple of them, that you're really proud of, that you want to showcase?
Yep, I can indeed. I guess, again, I am seeing a big progression through them, but I think that the second one, the second post, really captures that good leader needs to have. And those 3 qualities are emotional intelligence, leadership, and management. And it's very, very important that a leader, and whether you're a teacher leader, whether you're, the president of the country, you need to know which ones of these you're strong in and which ones of these you need to grow in. So, for example, I was very strong in management, but very weak in leadership and in emotional intelligence. Management is very, very important because it's your timetables, your systems, etc. So, you need that. But I learned that I needed to grow of emotional intelligence and in leadership. And, obviously I took some PD, I did some courses, but basically emotional intelligence comes down to listening, to really listening. And I believe it was Ocean Powell I heard saying one time, listen for the emotion, not the content, so you're listening for how you're trying to really feel how the person is. So, I made a few changes. Another thing I used to do too, Levi, is a survey to all my staff, anonymous survey twice a year. And one of the things that came back, as I triangulated the data, which came back strong, was that I was not a good listener, that I'd have my computer open when people would talk to me, etc.
Yeah.
So obviously that had to change. So I now have a standing desk in my office, and if somebody comes into my office, I just say, hold on a second, let me just finish this email or whatever it's finished, and then I move away from the computer, so I'm giving them my full attention. So that was part of my learning journey. And then the second part then that I was weak in was leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And this can be tough, but on my blog, one of the things I mention is to identify mentors. And I have a fabulous mentor. I'm meeting with him tomorrow morning at 8:00. Brent Mustich is his name. And he's been a head of school at, numerous great schools, fabulous man. But he taught me about leading with the mission and the vision in all that you do, and tying
Absolutely.
everything back to the mission and the vision of the school. And then when you really start living this, then that's what leadership is. So, these things are not rocket science. They can be learned, but you need to be willing to find out your strengths and your weaknesses.
Absolutely. And again, and I know you'll agree with, like, if we're asking our students to be reflective of what they are weak in or areas of growth, then we also need to be able to reflect and identify places that we also need to grow. And the fact that you're able to say very proudly that these are the things I'm working on, like, bravo, like and to lead by example for our students, just an incredible model that you're leading with your students. So with all this professional development and courses and learning, what are you hoping in your new role? What is your idea of the future of your school or future of the education model, or what is your own vision that you would like for your school to go towards?
Levi, I think, you and I both understand the immense value to, accreditation organizations such as WASC, CIS, NIASC, etc.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about these organizations is that the outcomes or the self-study system that they've put in place is like extremely research-based. It's gone through decades of research, and some schools will just look at it as, a visit coming up, we've got to write this report and get it done. But for me now, in my new role, what I'm looking to do is to align everything. So basically that our accreditation process is a continuous action research cycle, a continuous appreciative inquiry into how we can improve the school. And in particular, over the next couple of years, to really look at the B criteria from WASC, the written curriculum, the taught curriculum, and the assessed curriculum, and to really develop that, because at the end of the day, these core things, I believe, need to be in place for a school to run well.
Absolutely. And I mean, there is a reason why the B section is one of the heaviest sections in the report, because it is so important and because it is the foundation of how the school is running. And
and just to follow on that, Levi, I guess what I'm saying is just to align everything, that even if we have PD at the school, that it's aligned to our action plan, So I'm hoping anyway to just work on a lot of alignment that will lead to, better learning outcomes for all students.
No, absolutely. And talking and circling back to your dividing leadership model, like getting all those stakeholders involved, parents, teachers, community members, staff, and everybody involved, to make sure that everybody is aware of the mission statement. Everybody's aware of the action items. Everybody's aware of next steps and how we can grow as a school. And how do you involve, because I know you do involve your community members very heavily, how do you involve them into this process?
Yeah, that's a good question, Levi. I'm very fortunate. My colleague Dawn York, who I work with, she and I have created the focus groups,
Yep.
that there's a as even as possible a split of community members throughout the school, on these groups. Then regularly involving the secondary school student council that Dawn works with, and then the elementary school student council that currently one of our teachers, Denise and Julie, are working. So getting input from the students. And then we regularly have PTA meetings where we're updating them and teaching them and getting their input into the school's action plan. And then also, Levi, just updating the action plan every year and sending that out to the whole school community, so they're aware of where we're going with the various goals, but also to keep us accountable as well, to show our community that we're accountable to these goals, be it from the various IB self-studies or from the WASC self-study.
Absolutely. And do you find that these community members are enjoying being a part of this process?
Not particularly. No, I don't think at this point. I'm not feeling that people are, enjoying it. I think at this current, It took me a long time, Levi. You can imagine it took me like the bones of a decade to shift my thinking from this is about accreditation, checkboxes. We have to get this because of to this is an incredible, tool we have for transformation.
Yep. Absolutely.
So it took me, and I, yourself, like yourself, I've done lots of visits and whatnot. But the thing is going to take time for that shift, amongst all stakeholders. But I do believe that as my thinking changed, that the thinking of others will change as we see the immense value of the self-study processes.
Absolutely. And a learning culture changes with just one person, right? And that takes time. The culture of every school has been established, and to shift that culture takes time, and it takes effort, and it takes constant care and need and focus. And these self-studies and the accreditation process is an amazing tool for reflection to allow us to improve. Because when I went on the WASC study, one of the chair said, this is not a I gotcha moment for it. This is a let's see all the great things you're doing. Let's identify some of the areas that you could improve on, and let's help you figure out how to. Let's work on this. And it was constantly inviting us in, inviting the directors, the principals, the coaches, the directors of learning. And we brainstormed ways for them to improve section A, section B, section C, and D. And it was really great professional development for me, because I did learn quite a lot. And again, it's accreditation process that'll take over a couple of years, and then we'll go back and see how they're doing and make more suggestions, because at the end of the day, we're never quite done learning.
It's true.
So Brian, for first year principals or aspiring leaders out there, our listeners out there, what kind of advice do you have for them?
I guess the main thing would be to fill the bank. There's this this saying, I heard it in leadership, but it's just that you need to keep on putting deposits into the bank with your community. So that is done through open, honest communication, through when following through on your word. If you say you're going to do something, you do it, etc. So as you put these deposits into the bank, when something huge comes along, like you got to go to online teaching and no one has ever done this before or something like that, when you're making a big withdrawal like that, then you've basically put enough in the bank. That's the first thing. Another thing is not to waste teachers' time. To anything that's not useful, get it off there. Don't have a meeting if it can be communicated by email. Just remember, don't ever forget what it was like being a teacher when you move into the role. And face-to-face talks rather than email. Anything like if if somebody sends you an email that's rough, and if you respond to that in a similar vein, the situation will escalate. But if you calmly go and speak to the person face to face, it will, a stitch in time saves nine kind of thing. And then the other thing is just that in that first year, you can expect to be bullied, because not everybody is happy when they see other people having success, perhaps that they think they should have. And I worked for a lady, Alison Pedato, for many years in a charity called the Australian Charity for Children of Vietnam. And she said to me, ignore the naysayers. They're a small part of every great story. And that really helped me a lot in my first year as a coordinator back in the day. So that would be my advice to new principals, and definitely don't try to make too many changes. Appreciate what's been happening, in your first year and build on it.
Absolutely. And being an aspiring leader myself, what great advice is that? Building those relationships, understanding the culture of the school that you are coming in, realizing that there are great things there. And just because you are there doesn't mean everything needs to change, because honoring those really great things is really powerful. So, Brian, before we end, where can people find to connect with you and learn with you and to follow you on your journey, or even join your journey?
Yeah. I love connecting and learning from educators around the world. My favorite part of the PYP is the key concept of perspective, that other people and their views can be right. So I love learning from other people, and obviously learned a lot from you and the PYP chat team over the years. So I would say that the first place you'll find me is on Twitter at Brian Lalor, and I am very active in PYP chat. It's a fabulous community. I will also be guest appearing on MYP chat next month. So that'll be a first for me, and I'm looking forward to that with my old friend Callum Stewart. What else do I have going on? LinkedIn, and for my China friends out there, I'm Brian Lalor 1 on WeChat. And then please do check out my blog, brianlawler.blogspot.com. Lots and lots of posts on there that are just things I've learned on my journey.
Absolutely. And having checked out your posts, what great perspectives and reflections they are out there. And all of those links, listeners, will be in the show notes below. And Brian, we ask all guests here at Recess Duty, what do you remember from recess growing up?
Well, it's not going to be nice, unfortunately, but I grew up in the south of Ireland in Tipperary, and it was rough, Levi. It was really, really rough where I grew up. We had a really tough and violent upbringing, for want of a better word. So from recess, I remember organized fight, teachers ever being on duty, hail, rain or snow. We were out in the elements, and a lot of bullying. And unfortunately, I had a bad experience in elementary school and a great experience in secondary school, thanks be to God. But I guess that's what I remember is the bullying and the fighting. And then, as a leader now, what a incredible blessing. I was sitting down with my daughters for breakfast the other day. I was explaining to them that if we were back in my home country, when I was growing up, my youngest daughter has special needs, and I was explaining to my kids how I remember children similar to my daughter, how they would be called names and teased and bullied in my experience growing up. And my daughters couldn't fathom that. My two oldest were going, why would someone do? I don't get it, And I guess it's just wonderful to know that that's the experience that they're having now, that they're not experiencing that. And this is a problem all over the world. New Zealand, I'm hearing a lot of, difficult stories over there about bullying and whatnot. And something we need to remember and work against. And, as we say, it's learning for all students, no matter who they are, no matter where they're from, race, gender, etc. That's what we're all about.
Absolutely. And I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there that have very similar stories about recess, having similar stories myself, and knowing that we as teachers are always trying to make it better for our own students than what we had. So I totally understand, Brian. Well, thank you, Brian, for joining this week's episode of Recess Duty. Be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss our next episode. I'm Levi Allison, and have a great day of learning, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Recess Duty. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, please share this podcast with other educators so they can join the fun. And that is the end of our Recess Duty.